Hello, Laziali all over the world. Welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. I'm Vittorio Campanile, and here today we have to talk about what happened last night to Lazio. Uh, Terrible defeat against Fiorentina, and I guess the most concerning thing is not losing against Fiorentina. This is something that can happen, even though it was the first time that Italiano, as manager of Fiorentina, was able to beat Sarri as Lazio manager. But Alison McKenzie, I think the most concerning thing is how the team played or didn't play, most of all,
Yeah,
against Fiorentina, right?
I was going to say, did the team play? I mean, I think that is one of the worst Lazio performances I've seen for a long time. Just in the sense that no part of the team really functioned properly. And the biggest positive, I guess, to take away from that is that it was only 2-1. I think that was the most generous 2-1 I've seen for a long time. And Fiorentina will be kicking themselves that they didn't manage to finish more of their chances. It's really disappointing, that this is our first podcast in a week, so we didn't speak since the Torino game, and I thought that was a really positive result in a very difficult banana skin fixture. And there just is this problem with following things up. We saw it with Bayern followed by Bologna. Now we've seen it with Torino followed by Fiorentina.
I thought watching the game yesterday, I thought, well, this is the same thing that happened against Torino, right? First half, terrible first half, even against Torino. And second half starts against Torino. We managed to find a way to go to score at the first chance. Pretty much the same thing that happened against Fiorentina. So I was thinking, second half, maybe Lazio start playing again and we will win the game just like we did in Turin. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Lazio scored in the first half, and that was pretty much it. Second half, Alistair, it was again only Fiorentina. I don't know what's going on with this team. Yes, we have to mention that Lazio had a lot of players out. Rovella is still out. Patrick is still out. Gila was not available because he got a red card against Torino. Provedel had fever, Casale had fever. We have Zaccagni and Vecino who came in the second half who wasn't 100% fit. But can it be just this the reason why Lazio is not performing? Is this enough?
I mean, I think the general frustration is that it's been very difficult all season long to pinpoint one thing. Like after bad performances or bad runs of form, we've kind of gone around the block. We've talked about towards the start of the season that the defense wasn't as airtight as it used to be, and then it flipped to being the attack just couldn't score any goals. People have taken issue with Sarri's tactics throughout the season. The mentality issue with this team has come up time and again from, externally and internally. That was something Sarri again pointed to after this game, saying that the team had been mentally devastated. So, it is very difficult to say it's X or Y. And I think that's the thing Sarri's struggling with. He is scratching his head time and again. And I think he has for most of these 2.5 years, really, about these kind of dips. And they've been happening, though, Vittorio, for as long as we've been doing this podcast, almost 7 years now, I think we've been doing this. And I feel like the entire time we've been talking about, we used to always have the word blackout that came up, that famous Salzburg Europa League game. And just there are these dips, there are these massive lows that come in the roller coaster of a Lazio season all the time.
And this is the main reason why I don't agree with everybody that is complaining about Sarri. You can read, especially in the Italian press, everybody's blaming Sarri. He's the problem. He's the reason why Lazio is not performing. I just want to remind people that Lazio, under the Lotito era, finished 4 times in the Champions League. And in all those 4 seasons, Lazio in Serie A did worse than the year before and didn't finish in the top 4 or 5. It happened with the Rossi. It happened with Stefano Pioli. It happened with Simone Inzaghi. And it's happening again with Maurizio Sarri. So, Alistair, I don't blame the manager. I don't think if the issue repeats with different manager, can it be always a problem with the manager? I guess the only thing that didn't change in this period is the owner. So I would rather blame Lotito rather than the players and the manager, right? Because if you don't solve the problem changing the manager, and we have to say we change also the players, right? If the issue repeats time over time again, well, if there's only one component who doesn't change, then that's the issue, right?
Yeah, and it's the hardest thing to do, isn't it? To follow up a top four finish with another one, and that's kind of the holy grail for Lazio. That was essentially in that period about 10, 15 years ago how Napoli managed to break out from being a kind of top six team to being a regular top four team. You just, if you get a run of seasons together, suddenly you're getting the access to that cash and you're getting the confidence of doing that, and you can kind of make a habit of it. And Lazio have never been able to do that. So that was always why top four was such a big aim this season, is
Yeah.
that it just never happens. And look, you can take things in isolation about this season, and we should, I think, in terms of being in the last 16 of a Champions League and beating Bayern Munich. That is amazing. I mean, objectively, whatever your opinions are about Sarri, the players, Lazio, Lotito, anything else, that is a fantastic achievement on the highest level of European football, regardless of what happens in the second leg. And in the Coppa Italia semi-finals too. So I think that the issue is always, like you say, the fighting on several fronts. There was a bit of optimism at the start of the season that bringing in so many new players would help with the squad depth issue. But yeah, I think it's also the experience side of it, to be honest. And this isn't a team that's used to being able to do this. And I think that does play a bit of a part. And I think that particularly with this thing of throwing away leads, and I think that's where it really shows, because they can get too comfortable far too often. And we've seen this. I was looking it up earlier, and that's now 16 points Lazio have thrown away from winning positions this season. There's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games where Lazio have been ahead and either lost or drawn. And on the flip side, they've only once managed to do it the other way around, which was against Frosinone in December, where they've been behind and won a game.
Wow.
So that is a real issue.
Yeah, and it was an issue even last year again, if you remember. Can I ask you, Alistair, if Lazio wins the Coppa Italia and finish 7th or 8th, would it be a good season?
Yeah, I think any season where you win a trophy is a good season. Yeah, I think it has to be. And obviously, the Coppa Italia isn't the most prestigious trophy in the world, but it is a trophy that means a lot to Lazio and the fans. And the route to get there would be pretty spectacular, because Roma have already been taken care of, and now 2 legs against Juve. So regardless of who you beat in the final, that would be a pretty epic win. But look, I mean, when we're talking about this, I think part of the top 4 thing and following it up, I think part of the reason for that, why this is so hard, is in Serie A as well. There's so many teams who have that same ambition, and this season is clearer than ever that you've got Lazio, Fiorentina, Atalanta, Roma, Napoli. All these teams are kind of
Bologna.
In this. Bologna have kind of broken out, so I wouldn't quite put them in that category in terms of spending power and prestige and so on. But there are a lot of teams of the same level who aren't kind of up there with the top 3, but are fighting for that position. And that's what makes it so difficult. And all these teams have flaws. There are reasons to doubt all of those teams making the top 4 and to believe that they will. And it's what's made it so fascinating. But honestly, I think now, after the last month, it's really hard to see Lazio getting top 4, top 5, maybe. And as we alluded to before, that 5th spot is looking more and more likely to be a Champions League place. But even that, I mean, after this month, we've had, it was my big takeaway last night. We've had this chance to put the foot down in this race in the last month, with playing 4 of those teams we're in this race with, and getting 1 point from those 4 games. I mean, that is just so damaging.
Yeah, and we
Do you
have.
think it's over? The Champions League hopes. Do you think they're over?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really over, but it would be really complicated. I mean, we need Lazio to incredibly step up in the next games and pretty much win them all. So
Yeah,
that's why it's really. Let's not forget that Friday, not in 1 month time, next Friday we're playing AC Milan, and if we play like we did yesterday, I mean, this could be finishing 10-0 for Milan, to be honest, because we didn't mention, but Fiorentina did everything to lose the game yesterday. Really everything. They hit the post 4 times. I think Belotti missed a goal that I would have missed. They miss a penalty. Casale make an unbelievable save. You know, it's that was the typical game that you should have won 3-0 easily. And instead, Lazio was able to lose it. I repeat, Fiorentina did everything to lose that game, and we weren't able to win or at least get a point. So if you see Milan, who's not playing great, let's be honest, but they're playing much better than us. They are confident. They have a couple of players that can change the game in any situation. Um,
got Leao against Marisic.
you know, uh, I was thinking about that. Last year, one of the reasons why Lazio won 4-0 in Rome was that Leao was uh, marked by Marusic, who had an incredible game. I don't see it happening again. I mean, on Friday, it would be a miracle if Lazio get 1 point. And we need to win the game if you want to hope to finish in the top four. So, yeah, we need a miracle. I think, Alistair, that probably the players are already focused on the Munich game. This is my belief why we are so underperforming.
I don't know. I mean, that was something someone came back at me with last night when I mentioned this. That how disappointing it was that the big games last season were kind of Lazio's super strength that got them ultimately to second, was their ability to turn it on when it mattered. Whereas now in this last month they've not done that, and it comes back saying, you know, the last season they were able to focus just on Serie A because they chucked the Conference League. But I don't think that really applies at this point because we're at the exact same stage. You know, we'd played as many games this point last season as at this point this season. Whether you're focused or not, I think that's the thing that really takes it out of you. And I just don't see how that applies in this match because it's with three weeks between the two legs. It's not like it's you know, the meat and the sandwich of this match and you're focused on Bayern. I think it's just it's difficult to see how that first leg against Bayern can be given as the one excuse for this massive month of bad results in big games.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is just an excuse, but seeing the team so underperforming is incredible. Because let's be honest, Lazio won against Torino, and we didn't talk about that game, but it was pretty much only the second half. And I don't know, Lazio had just 2 shots on target and scored twice. We have to talk about Milinkovic Savic, who has been great, and we are not talking about Sergei, but the Torino goalkeeper, who's been terrible. To be honest, I thought even yesterday against Roma, he was terrible. Yeah, I mean, Torino and Fiorentina, we could have easily lost both games. Don't think we deserve to win the game against Torino, and we didn't win against Fiorentina. And the thing is, finally, Luis Alberto scores again, and you think, wow, now this is gonna be the turning point of the season. Second half, Luis Alberto was dreadful, and to be honest, I think apart from Guendouzi, I'm not saving anybody yesterday. Even Provedel on the second goal, he's making a mistake there. I think the deflection should have been somewhere else. Sari said at the end of the game he had fever, and this is, I don't know, Alistair. This year, how many times Provedel had fever? Both derby. Yesterday we had Casale with fever. Cataldi had a cold. I mean, what are they doing at Formella? They're training at 1 o'clock at night naked because they're always ill. I don't remember a team having so many issue with fever and cold like Lazio this year. Is Lotito saving on cost on warming and heating? I mean, this is incredible.
Need to put more of the budget towards kind of immune system boosters. Yeah, I know it was a bit weird because then he stopped during the first half, didn't he? And he didn't seem to have any particular injury. He would just was kind of had his head bowed and took some sort of
Yeah.
tube of something. I'm not entirely sure what it was, and then cracked on. But I mean, even then, it was he was probably the best player in that match, even though he was at fault a bit for the second because the palming it back into the path wasn't great, even if he saw it late. He still made a couple of incredible saves to kind of keep Lazio in it. And I think that's the disappointment because if you get to that game at half, when that goal went in, I actually burst out laughing. That was my response yesterday because it's like that's just so ridiculous because it was kind of a really extreme version of the kind of Lazio we saw against Bayern Munich. They're that where they are happy to soak up pressure. They do back themselves defensively, organizationally, to wait for their chances and then take them when they come. And I think that's probably the most effective version of Lazio we've seen is when they've been good at doing that. But this was far too much.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
balance was tipped way, way too far. And the pressure was far too much. And they just weren't coming out with any chances on the counter. But still, if you get in there at half time and you're 1-0 up, you can say, right, guys, what the hell was that? I mean, you've got to reset. We're somehow ahead here, but this has to change. And obviously, Sarri did try to change with a couple of subs, but I just don't understand how they can have a first half that bad and be ahead and still come out, and the same thing essentially happened again.
Can I ask you this? Were you surprised both against Torino and yesterday against Fiorentina with Lazio playing badly? Kamada didn't come in both games. Is this a sign that he's out? Why Sarri didn't try? Well, against Torino, we were down 10 men, so I guess he had to take off Luis Alberto and put a central defender. But yesterday, we were playing so badly, and you bring in Vecino instead of Kamada. I don't know. That's not a good sign for me.
Well, I think it's a sign that he trusts him more, trusts Vecino more. I think we can tell by now that Sarri doesn't think, for whatever reason, that Kamada is a player who can come in and influence a game.
Okay, but if you have this mindset, if you have decided this, then you have the January transfer window. Send Kamada somewhere else, loan him or sell him, and buy someone that you trust. Because we are not Real Madrid, we are not Manchester City. It's not that, hey, I look my bench and I have Modric to come to step in, etc. If you take off Kamada, then you don't have that many options in midfield, right? You have Vecino, and that's it. So why didn't Lazio think about this and say, okay, Sarri doesn't trust Kamada, we made the wrong decision, then let's try to make some money out of that and replace him?
Well, I mean, clearly it even came up yesterday after the game that Sarri isn't particularly happy with how the transfer window has operated. Because he said, I can't remember the exact quote, it was something along the lines of, if the club's in charge of that, and if I ask for player A and you give me player D or E, then this is what happens, that kind of idea. And, I don't think he was essentially blaming the new signings for that performance, but it's clearly something that's been an issue. And we used to think it was an issue between him and Tare. That was always the narrative that was going around. But Tare's left, and still there are clearly some frustrations about, I guess, Sarri's idea of what the team needs versus what he's been given. I think with a player like Kamada, I think it's pretty obvious why you don't get rid of him in January, which is that it was a bit of a coup to get him in for nothing in the first place. And he's clearly a distinguished player who's played at a very good level and has a lot of talent, but we just haven't seen it yet. And I don't mind that. I always think you should give players a second season, to be honest, to before you make a proper judgment. But
But
it's the strange thing with Kamada has just been that he's gone in the opposite direction to Isaacson, for example, where he kind of started strong and faded rather than starting weak and coming in strong. So
but
that's been a bit odd.
it's not only that. He hardly played in the last month or so.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a clear sign that Sarri doesn't trust him. So he has the option to leave in the summer. But even if he stays, do you think that suddenly Sarri will give him a chance? I mean, it looks to me that he's a little bit like Toma Basic. He had the opportunity, well, not that many. He didn't take them, and now he's out. I don't think Sarri will give him any other option if things doesn't change. I mean, if this summer we don't see a huge revolution, we can have, which can happen, right? We can see Lazio selling Ciro, Luis Alberto, etc., and maybe then build a team around Kamada. But not sure about that. I don't think Kamada will want to stay another year in this situation if he doesn't get any guarantees, right?
Yeah, and also just because it might depend a little bit on Sarri's future as well, because if Sarri's going nowhere, you know that he's not going to change his system and his style. And I think the biggest issue for Kamada has been that there's not really been a position for him that's worked in Sarri's system, or at least according to Sarri himself. And more often than not, I guess he's been used as a kind of auxiliary Alberto, but that's not really playing to his strengths. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
Do you think? Do you think after the words Sari said yesterday, he's gonna stay next year, or if this is pretty much saying, "Hey, you blame me, but the reason why we're underperforming this season is not mine. It happened already in the past. So I ask A, they gave me D or F. It's a clear message, right? And usually Lotito doesn't love this type of messages, especially when we didn't talk about it because we didn't do a podcast after Torino. He said, look, Guendouzi, I picked him. I choose him. Guendouzi is a great player because I picked him. Yes. So who picked Kamada or Castellanos? Because you're always there taking credits for things that go well. But when things go wrong, it's never your fault. So I think Sarri was a little bit annoyed by these quotes from Lotito and wanted to send a straight message. And usually when these things happen, it doesn't end well for the manager, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a bit back and forth between them. It's felt. I mean, I always find that quite a hard one to read because it's essentially kind of two old Italian guys shouting at each other. And what I've learned from my years in Rome is that when kind of an old Italian guy is shouting, it's not always that they're actually that angry or serious about it. I don't know. You'll have more experience with this than I do. But I just think that it's hard to know like how much of it is just bluster basically and how much of it is real frustration or annoyance with each other. I think that maybe behind closed doors the relationship is still quite good, but it's just quite hard to get a read on it.
Wow, this is racism,
huh? No, I totally disagree with that.
Yeah. Wow, my God, I should end it here, the podcast immediately. No, I think there's something going, and I didn't appreciate the Lotito's quote about Guendouzi, etc. So I think Sarri is disappointed again. We know he wanted Berardi and Zelinski, and we can talk about this, saying that probably Lazio would have needed younger player. But for example, Inzaghi wanted Acerbi and Mkhitaryan, and he's winning the Scudetto, and we would all argue, "Wow, you're playing, you signed very old players, but if it works, I mean, who cares, right? That they are older. You need to win the Scudetto, not to do a under 21 team." So maybe Berardi and Zelinski would have come and changed that mentality. I don't know. We will never know, I guess. But the fact that Zielinski, sorry guys, will sign for Inter is making me think that, well, maybe that would have been a good signing for Lazio instead of getting Kamada, who's hardly playing, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think probably learned there's something to be said for signing players there's more guarantees about, and I think it's good to get a mix, isn't it? Because you can't really afford to do that as Lazio, or at least you're not going to spend the money in Latito's case. And with Isaacson, Gila, Castellanos, all these guys who've come in, Guendouzi, you don't really know until they're there how they're going to react to Serie A, to Sarri's systems, to whatever. And some sink, some swim, and it's been pretty hard to predict over the years which ones will work out and which ones won't, because we do complain about players um, who are signed to great kind of fanfare and then disappoint. But there's also been quite a lot of good examples of players who we didn't expect much from, who've then actually performed really well. Like Felipe Caicedo or Adam Maricic or Senad Lulic or well, now Mario Gila's been the latest one. So it goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah, who could expect that end of February we are missing Gila? We are complaining that we don't have Gila available for game. Talking about Gila, how do you rate Casale performance yesterday?
Well, you know what? By the time we got to halftime, I was like, right, that was terrible. But if I'm looking for one positive here, I feel like Casale looked pretty good. He made one absolutely amazing block on the line. He
Yeah.
made a couple of really good interceptions. He was good in the air. There were so many corners coming in, and I thought he was putting his body around well to defend those. I guess the bar has been quite low with him this season. So I was looking at that thinking, okay, we've got something here. He looks like he's got a bit of confidence back, and we're 1-0 up and so on. But the problem was in the second half, the team deteriorated, and I think he kind of did as well. And obviously the penalty, there's been a bit of debate around that, but it was pretty clumsy and unnecessary, in my opinion, for him to go in like that, because it gave the ref a decision to make. And yeah, there were a couple of other instances which weren't particularly impressive either. So basically overall, I think it wasn't great, but I wouldn't put him in the category of being this was a Casale disaster, this game. I don't think it was. I think it was overall a disaster from the team, but I don't think he was particularly worse than everyone else.
Yeah, I would save Oli Guendouzi yesterday, to be honest with you. He was the only one who played for, 95 minutes and give everything. All the others, I'm not 100% sure about that. About Casale, well, I don't want to talk about the penalty because it was embarrassing from my point of view, but it didn't change the game. And again, you don't win a game when the opponent misses a penalty. That's simply unacceptable from my point of view. But yeah, I thought overall, Lazio didn't lose because of Casale playing, and this is one of the things that drive me crazy. I mean, uh, pretty much all the players played badly except Guendouzi, and this is it's very bizarre. I mean, usually you have at least 2-3 players that play decently, but yesterday I think Ciro Immobile didn't touch the ball once in the second half. Felipe Anderson, we are one. I think probably the biggest responsibility is Felipe Anderson, because the equalizer, we are doing a counter attack, and if Felipe Anderson passed the ball to Luis Alberto, we're probably going to score a second goal. Instead, he passed the ball to the Fiorentina guy, and we are all off balance, and they score. So that's where really I felt, okay, we're going to lose this game.
Yeah. And what about Milan on Friday? I mean,
Oh my God.
Well, two questions. What hope do you give us, and what would your approach be in terms of, I guess, team selection and general approach to the match? I mean, do you go into this like the Bayern Munich game and sit and soak up, or do you try and play a bit more?
Well, my biggest hope is a strike from airplanes so that they're not able to reach Rome. I think that's our biggest opportunity.
There's a
But
train, 3 hour train is easy.
yeah, no, that's the problem. You know. But apart from that, seeing how Lazio played the last two games, how can we stop? Again, I repeat, Milan is not playing great at all, but we are playing so badly that I think if we played against Fermana, we probably lose even against them. So uh, we have to see if we are able to recover well. We didn't mention something. Cataldi played really well in the last games, but I thought yesterday he was dreadful. I thought he didn't have any more energy on him. And the biggest issue we had is that we had so many injured players in the last month or so that we had been forced to play the same starting 11 for 2 3 consecutive games. And Cataldi was the example. Yesterday he was dreadful. I thought he couldn't run. He was so tired that he was very bad. So I hope we recover Rovella because Cataldi needs to rest. Talking about rotation, well, maybe Zaccagni could start. I didn't see him playing really well yesterday, to be honest. But Sari said he wasn't ready. He had to force the change because Isaacson had a little issue. So I don't know. It's unfortunately it's not the type of team that you say, "Hey, we play Milinkovic Savic on Friday and he's going to change the game." I don't see Kamada coming in and changing the game, right? And Luis Alberto is not playing great. Felipe Anderson is down again. Chile Mobile didn't have a chance. I don't know. We need the team to step up, and I'm not sure they're going to do it.
Yeah, well, Zaccagni's return, I think, has come at a good time just to add a little bit of life to that attack. Yeah, it's just you've spoken about this time and again, but the problem is if you start badly as Lazio, the bench when it rolls on in attack, I mean, is just not doing enough. Castellanos and Pedro are just not injecting the energy and the threat that you kind of need. And yeah, the more months go on, the more criticism Tati will get, apart from your daughter who loves him. But I think everyone else.
And again, Pedro came in and he was pretty much invisible. And again, this is not the first time. And again, you had January transfer market. You should have sit down and said, "Hey, I need these players, and Pedro, Kamada, etc. You can send them away. We don't need them." If Kamada doesn't play, why do you keep him? If Pedro is playing like this, and again, this is not the first time he comes in and it's pretty much invisible or damaging the team, let's send him somewhere else. Thanks, Pedro. You've been great. The goal you score at the derby will always be in our heart, etc. But you're done. Let's give other players an opportunity. The bench with 5 substitution is so important as of these days. And you bring in Castellanos, who's, I don't know, the worst striker in the Serie A at the moment. Pedro, who is not able to dribble past nobody at the moment. You don't really have options, right? So you had January transfer market. Do something. You have the money. This time you have the money. It's just on Lotito who didn't want to spend them.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is this isn't a vintage Milan team. This isn't, a Scudetto winning Milan team.
No.
This isn't even the Milan team of last season that got to a Champions League semi-final. This isn't the Rafa Leao of last season. I mean, it's not. There shouldn't be the fear factor that there once was for this fixture, and especially because, as you alluded to earlier, the 4-0 win. And there isn't a fear factor anyway, I don't think, for this group of players. There shouldn't be in this fixture. And as a home, and obviously Bologna was a disaster, which we saw coming straight after Bayern. But generally, big match at home, Lazio are performing, with the exception of the Inter game and the Bologna game.
Yeah, I want to see a reaction, to be honest with you. I want to see the team coming in and playing 90 minutes as it was the Champions League final. And Yeah, I think I agree with you. This is not a great AC Milan, but we are playing so badly that at the moment I wouldn't rely on Lazio winning against Salernitana. So, but I want to see a reaction. I want to see the players finally doing something different, competing, fighting on every tackle, doing the best they can to win the game. Because again, this Milan is not unbeatable. Lazio just have to step up. Again, my concern is Lazio has Bayern Munich 4 days after. So, maybe some player will think, well, I won't do this tackle because if I get injured, I'm going to miss a big game. But I mean, I hope something change. I hope that after this bad performance, they won't think about Bayern. They will focus on against AC Milan.
Yeah.
And before we wrap it up, there's something really funny. There's going to be 3 weeks in a row that Lazio won't play on the weekends, which is crazy for me.
Modern football, Vittorio.
But it happens only to Lazio. So I guess it's only Lazio playing modern football. What about Inter, Milan, etc.? I mean, you know it because you've been living in Rome. Going to the stadium on Friday night is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not convinced it's a huge excuse.
I'm not saying it's an excuse. It's strange.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not easy. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, these are the prices you pay for being in European competition as well. So
it looks like next year we're not gonna pay that price then.
no, probably not. I mean, look, it is an opportunity because it is week by week. It feels a bit like at the moment we're swinging between, because the team's been so inconsistent. Everyone's kind of like on a high one week and then completely depressed the week after. And I was saying to you before we came on, I just read the transcripts of the press conference from last night. It was like the apocalypse had happened. It was so much doom and gloom about the end of a cycle and all this. I just think, come on. I mean, it was a terrible performance. I'm not defending it for a second, but if we
Sorry, you've been living in Rome. You just had a racism comments about Italian, and then you know how Italian overreact after a football game. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to you, right?
no, of course
You
it
know,
isn't.
what,
Of
what,
course it
what,
isn't.
what was the
What I mean is that as a result of that, it means that the Milan game offers an opportunity to then turn it back into a positive again, and suddenly the front pages are all, what a great Lazio and all the rest of it. So you can use that emotional roller coaster to your advantage.
I hope so. I hope so. Let's finish on a optimistic tone. Yeah, let's hope that Lazio player will react and maybe Kamada will start and have a great game. Alistair, as you're looking always below, can you show everybody our new guest?
Well, he's kind of like under the table and fast asleep. I can try. Monty, are you going to wake up? Here we go. Yeah, he's going to come and say hello. 1 second. Oh, here we go. Say hello, Monty.
I don't know why you didn't call him Ciro, but okay.
He's finally sleepy. If you've seen me jumping off camera throughout the episode, it's because he's been causing complete chaos around the room, but he's okay now.
A new guest. Maybe he's going to be the new Lazio Primavera talent.
He's got four feet, so that's going to help.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Thanks again, Alistair, for joining me. Thanks, Monty, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. And we'll be back after Lazio Milan. Let's hope it's a better podcast. We are happier than today. Remember, everybody, to rate and review the podcast if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And if you want to support the channel, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at $2 a month. Take care, guys. Ciao.
Ciao.